You're listening to TGI Sports Talk with your host, Keith Angle, on Northeast Streaming Sports.
Hey guys, Keith Angle for TGI Sports Talk right here on the Northeast Streaming Sports Network. How are you today? Oh, guys, another dreary day here in upstate New York. As you know, we're the first live streaming webcast, the sports webcast in East Greenbush, New York. And it's been rainy here for about 4 days. It's going to rain for the next, 7 days. Anyway, enough with the weather forecast. It seemed to have gotten the wrong coffee cup this morning. But I want to say good morning to everybody. Our guest today, coming up, we'll talk about in a little bit, will be... Good morning, Dave Guyette. How are you today? Dave, you will let me know if the audio goes out today, I hope, because we have another taped interview, and I'm on a streak of 3 weeks in a row with technical difficulties on Friday morning. So we'll be playing that recording with Shane Matthews interview in just a few minutes. I want to thank my guests from last week. Darrell Evans, former Major League Baseball player, really good Major League Baseball player with the Braves, the Giants, and the Tigers. We had a great interview. He had some technical difficulties, so we ended up talking to him on the phone. We're talking to Shane Matthews on the phone. I got to apologize up front because I called Shane Matthews Sean about 4 times. I know I apologized to him at least once, but no excuse. I know a lot of Seans, and I had trouble getting Shane in my head. I don't know why, and I apologize to you, Shane Matthews, as you see this. Sunday, we'll be on live again with our live streaming Stream of Consciousness show. Mark Mancini will join us again. We're going to break down some NFL football quarterback situations. We'll also have on some special guests early on with a new show that will be coming on Northeast Streaming Sports YouTube network soon. I have loud music playing. Are you serious, Dave? Hang on. You know, Dave, it's always something on Fridays. What is it? Bear with me, guys. Let's see what we got going on here. I'm going to listen in. You know, Dave, it's always something on Fridays. Well, I hear it okay when I turn it on quickly, so I'm going to assume we're okay. Anyway, my guest today. Oh, by the way, check out the Sunday Stream of Consciousness show on Sunday, okay? 9 a.m. Eastern time. Check out our Wednesday show, the TGI Sports College Football Huddle. It aired Wednesday at 7. You can catch it on TGI Sports Talk here on Facebook and on YouTube. You can still watch it. We broke down some of the Heisman candidates from each of the top 25 teams. We talked ACC outlook with Wake Forest analyst Larry Sorensen. We talked about some of the coaching carousel changes across the NCAA landscape, and we'll be diving into more of that as the weeks go on. So please, still playing. Sounds like a radio. I don't know what it could be, Dave. You sure it's not on your end? Because I just turned mine on. Let's go on. So please, still playing. Sounds like a radio. Yeah, I just quickly turn on my audio, looking at my Facebook page, and it appears to be okay, Dave. We'll check it out again in a second. Our guest today, as I said, Shane Matthews, former 2-time SEC Player of the Year under Steve Spurrier. He was Steve Spurrier's first starting quarterback when he came to the University of Florida and turned the Florida Gator program around. Shane Matthews was part of that turnaround. Shane also played in the NFL for quite a long time, and he got most of his playing time with the Chicago Bears and the Washington Redskins. Again, the team formerly known as the Washington Redskins, I guess. It was Steve Spurrier again that brought him into Washington, but he also was with the Bengals in a backup role, the Bills in a backup role, and he spent some time with a few other teams as well, but most prominently with the Bears and the Redskins. So we're going to play that video now, and we'll be back after that to wrap up the show and talk about a few more things as well. So let's, with no further ado, play the Shane Matthews interview that I did the other night. Talk to you soon. Had a really good long career in the NFL. Okay, as I said in the intro, my guest today is Shane Matthews, former two-time SEC Player of the Year at Florida. Steve Spurrier's first quarterback as he assumed the reins at Florida. Had a really good long career in the NFL, and he also hosts his own podcast now, Pot Up with Matthews in the morning. And it's some really good stuff. If you guys haven't checked it out, I really hope you'll do so. And I can't wait to talk to Shane about his career, both at Florida and in the NFL. Shane, welcome.
I appreciate you having me on.
I appreciate you coming on. I know you're not on video today, and I appreciate you taking the time to at least get on the audio with us so that we can do this. So with college football running, well, college and pro football gearing up, I wanted to chat with you about, your career in football, and we'll talk a little bit about, the SEC in Florida today and maybe some other topics as we go through here, obviously. Sean, when you were growing up in Mississippi, and I believe you were the Mississippi High School Player of the Year in your senior year as well, did you think you were going to be, were you being recruited by a lot of schools besides Florida where you ended up going?
Yeah, I'm a coach's son, so I've been around the game my whole life. I was only 165 pounds my senior year in high school, and I probably wouldn't be recruited if I was that size today, but played on a really good team, won the state title, played all three sports, football, baseball, and basketball. But yeah, I was recruited by mostly everybody in the Southeast except Alabama. My dad played at Ole Miss. Everybody kind of thought I would go to Ole Miss, but I wanted to leave the state, and it basically came down between LSU and Florida. And for some reason, I picked the Gators.
There's not a specific reason, that you chose them. Coach Spurrier wasn't quite there yet when you're making that decision, right?
No, he was not there, and
yeah.
Was wanting to leave after my first couple of years because I hadn't played at all. Because I knew I could go to Ole Miss and possibly play, but my parents didn't want me to transfer, and then they hired some guy named Steve Spurrier who I'd never heard of, and he came in and gave me an opportunity.
Yeah, the team had struggled for a few years. There was a few good years mixed in there, but as a rule, Florida football had been struggling a bit. What was your first impression of Coach Spurrier when he came in and took over the program?
Well, he basically said in his first team meeting, he didn't care who you were, what you had done, how many games you had played. It didn't matter to him. He was going to give everyone an opportunity to compete and see what they could do. And a lot of coaches say that, but they don't actually do it. But he did. And, the first couple of weeks of spring ball, I didn't get a whole lot of action. And every now and then he'd put me in some scrimmages, and I'd play pretty well. And then I played in the spring game and played extremely well. And he pretty much named me the starter after that for 3 years.
And that's a good run. That's a good run at any point in time in college football. And the SEC was still a pretty good league back then. I don't think it was the powerhouse maybe that it is today, and it's becoming obviously with realignment, which maybe I'll touch on later. Who are your? Let's stick with Coach Spurrier for a second. What was your relationship like him? What did you guys hit it off? Was he a guy that you could hit it off with, or what? How did that dynamic play out?
Well, he's a coach that demands perfection, but realizes that you're not going to play a perfect game. There's never been a quarterback to play a perfect game, and being a coach's son, being coached by my dad prepared me for him. He was, like I said, he's very demanding, but he had played the position. There's so many people that coach football but never played the position they coach, and I think that's what made him so successful and why his quarterbacks were so productive, because he knew what you could and could not do, and the way he prepared you and coached you up It allowed me to play professional football for a long time.
As you were maturing as a player, did you foresee that you could become as good as you became? As I said, 2-time SEC Player of the Year. That's certainly nothing to sneeze at. Great accomplishment. You had some great years. The team had some really good years. I think 2 years in the top 10. And you had some great personal success. Did you foresee that for yourself as you were building towards it?
Well, I mean, he changed Florida football. Florida wouldn't be where they are today if it wasn't for Steve Spurrier. And, in his 12 years at Florida, they won the SEC 7 years.
Yeah.
I think people talk about that. 7 of the 12 years, he won one national title, played for another. Unfortunately, I didn't get to play for a national title, but we laid the foundation my first 3 years for the next group to come in and make that run. But, unfortunately, he decided to leave in 2001, 2001. Or who knows how the Florida program would have continued, because he had it rolling. And a lot of people, if you go and you look in the 90s, Florida and Florida State would have probably been playing in the 14 playoff if they had the 14 playoff back then, pretty much every year.
Every year, yeah.
They were very dominant football teams.
You think that they could have had a run like, Nick Saban has had at Alabama here since he returned to the college game? It could have been that type of run?
I do. And I mean, you could throw Florida State in there. I mean,
True.
Bobby Bowden.
True.
I want to say Bobby Bowden's teams in the 90s never finished worse than 3 or number 4 in the country. So what Alabama has done is remarkable. Take nothing away from them, but the way the format is, it allows you to build that dynasty. And if they had this format back in the 90s, I think Florida or Florida State would have possibly had the very similar run.
You bring up Coach Bowden, and obviously there was kind of I don't know if love-hate is the right term for their relationship, but they had a very interesting relationship and a rivalry that Florida and Florida State had for quite a few years. It's kind of diminished now, obviously, between scheduling and Florida State being a bit down. What was that relationship? Were they friends? Did they like each other? I know they must have respected each other, but obviously Coach Spurrier had some great lines, and Free Shoes U is one of my favorites, obviously. But what do you remember about that relationship?
Well, I mean, I don't know if they were real close and they were competing against one another, but I do know, Bobby Bowden had a list of people he wanted to say goodbye to in his last couple of weeks here on this earth. Mm-hmm. And I do know for a fact that Coach Spurrier and he talked. He was one of the people on his list. So I think Coach Spurrier really enjoyed that, being able to talk to Bobby before he passed. But yeah, it was an intense rivalry. Like I said, it came down to that game a lot, as well as when Florida State played Miami in the 90s.
Do you think, I guess I'll not to jump forward, but I mean, do you see, the fact that those teams aren't able to play year in and year out? I think, if I remember right, back in the day, that they pretty much played each other almost every single year, the 3 teams. And today it's pretty much impossible to put that schedule together. And I think it hurts football myself, not having these traditional rivalries year after year. What's your thoughts there, Sean?
The Florida and Miami played not every year. I never played Miami. Florida and Florida State play every year.
Yeah.
And Miami and Florida State play every year. Obviously, they're in the same conference now, but when the SEC expanded to 12 and then to 14, it was almost impossible to keep Miami on the schedule.
Yeah, and I find these things unfortunate. I mean, since I'm on the topic, what are your thoughts on this whole realignment that continues to dominate the college landscape today, with Texas and Oklahoma heading to the SEC in 5 years, most likely, I would say, long before that? What are your thoughts on this and what will happen, the domino effect this will probably bring about?
Well, the most dominating conference and college football just got more dominating, basically. It's the premier conference in college football. People want to be in this league, and you just brought two major brands into the SEC. So I don't know what's going to happen now, but the SEC has been dominating college football for a long, long time.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to change.
Do you, Shane? Do you think that they're done, the SEC, or is this just the beginning of them building a mega conference?
I mean, 16 is a lot. I mean,
is.
possibly they could add a couple more. I don't know. I don't think we'll hear about it this year. I do think Oklahoma and Texas will be playing in the SEC next year.
Yeah, I do too.
So it's going to be interesting. It ain't going to be easy to win the SEC. I mean, it never is, but it's even more difficult now.
You think the playing field gets leveler? I mean, is Alabama going to be? I mean, obviously we've had Alabama, Florida, Georgia. I mean, they've been not that there hasn't been other good teams, obviously, but sustained year after year. You know, those teams have been up there. Do you think they're going to have? I would think it's only natural that it's going to get harder for them to maintain that, or does it get better because more good players are attracted to the SEC even now?
Oh, I mean, Alabama's going to get who they want, but you can only sign 25 kids each year. But Bama's the premier program in America. I mean, Oklahoma. I think honestly, this year, I think Oklahoma's going to play Texas A&M for the national title. Those are the two best teams, or that's the two teams I think is going to play for it all. But yeah, it's dog eat dog. I mean, you got Florida, Georgia, LSU, Alabama. Auburn's down a little bit, but they always have athletes.
Yeah.
Tennessee, who knows? I mean, week in and week out in the SEC, it is just rough.
Who was, going back to your time at Florida, who was your major rival within the conference? Alabama wasn't.
Yeah, we beat out
as good, but
we beat Alabama handily my first 2 years.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
so number one in America in '92, but I had them on the ropes. But it was Tennessee. The Tennessee-Florida game was basically whoever. It was always week 3. Whoever won that usually won the SEC. And Tennessee won a national title in the '90s as well. We handled Georgia. Spurrier in his years, he was 11-1 against Georgia. I never lost to Georgia. And then obviously Florida State was a big rivalry game as well. So it's kind of turned a little bit. It's Florida, Georgia in the East now, where it used to be Florida, Tennessee. Eventually, you would think Tennessee would come back and be a little more competitive, but who knows?
Yeah, it's hard to believe that they've been as down as they've been for as long as they've been. I thought they would have come back by now. And maybe they will with the new coaching change. What about some of the players you played with? I mean, before you became the starting quarterback, I mean, Emmitt Smith was there when you were at Florida, correct?
Yeah, he was. I was on the team with him for 2 years, and really good player. We were just, I mean, you didn't know a whole lot. I mean, you knew who Emmitt was, but the offense was just not very productive other than Emmitt, really.
Yeah, he had some remarkable years. And obviously once Coach Spurrier came in, the offense changed a lot, and then the approach to the game changed a lot. And you still had a great running back in Eric Rett and really good wide receivers and Willie Jackson and Kirk Kirkpatrick. And are there any other guys that come to mind? And is there a reason? And I guess I'll ask this question along with what I just asked. I mean, with those prolific offenses, not a lot of these guys really translated to have great professional careers. What do you kind of attribute that to?
I can't answer that. I mean, we put a lot of guys in the NFL, a lot of defensive, offensive guys. I mean, the NFL, and I heard this the other day, and I don't think people realize this. The National Football League has been around for 100 years. This will be the 101st year. There's only been 24,000 people playing in the NFL, and only 1,000 have played 8 or more years. So it is it's a young. I mean, the average career is 2.5 years. So guys don't make it real long. You go look at rosters, it is turnover year in and year out. Yeah, the so-called superstars that people think of, but you look at your roster, in the NFL year in and year out. It changes dramatically. So it's just hard to play a long time in the NFL.
Yeah, and you got there. I mean, you didn't get drafted, but you were a non-drafty signee with the Bears, and I mean, you did stick around the game for 13 years. You had a couple of years where you played quite a bit in Chicago, and then some years where you didn't play much, and then you were reunited with Coach Spurrier in Washington. When you were for you, Shane Matthews, when you were struggling in the NFL, what kept you coming back?
Well, I was cut several times, but coaches brought me back, not so much for my ability, because the most I ever weighed in the NFL was 192 pounds.
Uh-huh.
It was my mind. I was a guy that could, I don't know if I had a photographic memory. I was never diagnosed with one of those, but I never studied my playbook. I would look at a play one time and I never had to look at it again. I knew what everybody did. And so I could learn a coach's playbook in 10 minutes, and coaches could count on me. And I was just blessed to understand the game, understand the X's and O's, and that's why I lasted 14 years in the NFL.
Yeah, not that I think you are looking to blast any of your ex-teammates, and I'm not asking you to, obviously, but I look at some of the guys that you played with at the same position. Do you think you should have played in front of some of those guys more often than you got a chance to?
I mean, I got opportunities, but when you don't get drafted, you don't get a lot of opportunities. And, like I said, there were a lot of teams I was on. I was on 6 teams in my 14 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I think 3 or 4 first-round quarterbacks were taken. And only, I believe, one of those lasted more than 3 years in the NFL, and that was Carson Palmer,
Mm-hmm.
who was a player. The other guys were out of the league in 3 or 4 years. So just because you aren't drafted, they look for the measurables, how big is a guy, how strong is his arm, and all this kind of stuff, which is fine. But there is so much more to playing quarterback than arm strength and size. I would have loved to have been blessed with a tremendous arm and to be 225, 230, what these quarterbacks are today, but I wasn't. But mentally, I was as smart as anybody in the room.
Yeah, I think it's funny that I can think of one guy offhand who wasn't the top physical specimen. He couldn't run. He couldn't throw with a velocity to be a high draft pick, and he certainly has become maybe the best quarterback in the history of the NFL. And I'm guessing you can imagine who I'm talking about there, and Tom Brady.
Well, yeah, I mean, I can tell you right now, Brady is not this sounds really silly, is not a very talented quarterback. When the scouts look at the talent measurables these days,
mm-hmm.
When you think of Aaron Rodgers or Patrick Mahomes, they are off the chart with the way they can throw the football. But Brady is extremely accurate. He understands the game, and obviously his record speaks for itself. But yeah, it's you never know at the quarterback. Well, you never know in the NFL who's going to turn out and be. I mean, the two of the greatest players in the history of the game came from Jackson State and Mississippi Valley State, and Walter Payton and Jerry Rice.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter where you play. The NFL usually finds you.
Yeah. You just got to be lucky enough to get seen at the right time, I guess. Let's move forward a little bit. When you get to Washington and Coach Spurrier's in the NFL now, were you surprised that he made the jump to the NFL? First of all, I guess
I was really upset that he left Florida, because I knew what he was building there and how successful he was going to be and had been. But he was the highest paid NFL coach,
right?
When Gator paid him, I think, $5 million a year. So, sometimes, they always say coaches after 10, 12 years, it's time for a new challenge, move on from where you are. And I think I know the Gator Nation, the fan base, they weren't upset with him, but, here he is winning 9, 10, 11, 12 games a year. And people, I don't want to say they were upset, but only one team could win the national title every year. So I think he said, you know what, it's time for me to go take a new challenge.
Were you surprised that his system and his career in the NFL did not work out to his expectations or other people's?
Well, I would say this. There's two factors, or he would probably still be coaching the NFL. He's as good a coach, X's and O's, I've ever been around. And I played for Nick Saban at the Dolphins. I played for a lot of coaches in the NFL. Nobody can draw up and call plays like he can. His problem was Dan Snyder was the owner who didn't give him control of what he needed to be in control of. And the other was he didn't have a legitimate NFL quarterback ever.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you think about it.
Not even Shane Matthews?
No. I mean, like I told you, I was a good, solid teammate.
Yeah.
Back up, however you want to. A guy, coaches, and players, they knew if I went in the game, I wasn't going to. I mean, I didn't play well at times, but they knew I knew what to do, what everybody should do. And that, as a backup, you don't get any reps at all at practice. You stand around the entire practice. And so that's why I lasted. But if he would have had a 6'4", 235-pound guy that had an NFL-type arm, he would still be coaching the NFL. And if he was at a different franchise.
You know, you mentioned it. I really think Dan Snyder, you said it, and Dan Snyder has been an anchor around that franchise, I think, since he took it over myself. And he's chased a lot of good coaches out of town there. So,
yes, and I actually played my rookie year with Rivera, and I think he's a tremendous football coach. So, and they got a tremendous defense. I think with Fitzpatrick as their quarterback, I think the Redskins are going to win that division this year.
You know, I'm on the same boat as you as long as Fitzpatrick can hold up his end of the bargain. And Ron Rivera seems like I feel like he's a great coach, as you said, and a good person. He seems to be, again, seeing it from the outside, looking in. You know him a little bit more personally, and he just seems like a really good human being on top of being a really good football coach.
Yep, no doubt about it.
What about? I mean, you mentioned that. I'm going to guess if I said who's the best coach you played for, it would be Steve Spurrier. But are there others that you felt were really above the norm and helped Shane Matthews out through his career?
I mean, Dick Duran was the head coach in Chicago for 2 years, a Yale guy. I thought he was extremely smart. Learned a lot from him. I was with Marvin Lewis his first year in Cincinnati when they drafted Carson Palmer. I love Marvin. I played for Mike Mularkey for 2 years in Buffalo. I thought he was great. And then I was with Saban my last year in the Dolphins. I mean, nobody knew what Saban was going to become because he hadn't had any success in the NFL. So, I mean, like I said, I learned more in my 3 years in college than I did in my 14 years in the NFL.
Is there a coach? I always ask guys this, and I rarely get an answer, I guess, but I guess it's our tougher question. Is there a coach that you would like to have played for and didn't get a chance to play for? On either level.
Well, college, I don't think I could have picked or played for a better one. I think in the NFL, I mean, I don't know at the time. I can't even remember where he was coaching at the time, but I think watching games now, there's two coaches. And actually, I almost had a chance to play for Sean Payton. I can't remember where I signed it, but they ended up signing Mark Brunell as the backup. It was between me and Mark Brunell. Either Sean Payton or Andy Reid would have been my two.
Two great coaches in their own right, for sure. What about teammates in the NFL? I mean, again, you played on some teams that weren't really knocking the door down to the Super Bowl, but who were some of the guys that you played with during your NFL career that stand out as in a different situation they might have done better, or just
well, I mean, yeah, I didn't play on a lot of great teams. My rookie year, I was fortunate to have a lot of the '85 Super Bowl Bears with the Fridge, Richard Dent, Steve McMichael, Kevin Butler, who is still a very good friend of mine. I really enjoyed my year in Cincinnati. It was John Kitna, who's an awesome guy, and then Carson Palmer, who is one of the most talented quarterbacks I've ever been around. Great kid. I think Chad Johnson, was probably the most talented receiver I ever played with. You know, I'd have to really sit down and think hard. The best player I saw in all my years in the NFL was Barry Sanders by far.
I was a shock when he retired. He must have run, you know, I know he ran for a ton of yards, but he probably ran for even more when you look at all the running around he did sometimes in the backfield just to try to get a hole to run through. So Barry Sanders was an exciting player for sure. What about, oh gosh, what about the coaches you hated to play against?
Hated to play against?
Yeah, because maybe you didn't like them, or is there anybody stands out?
No, I'll be honest. I never really thought of it that way. Not at all. So I don't think there's any coach that I did not like. I mean, I didn't know many of them, so I didn't really have a whole lot of hatred towards anybody.
Yeah. Well, you did some coaching of your own after your playing career. Was that something that you aspired to do, maybe on a higher level, whether college or professionally, or you were happy, you know, teaching young players in high school and such?
No, I always wanted to coach college football. The problem is I played too long. You know, a lot of college coaches don't play football. They may play college ball and then don't make it, and they become a graduate assistant, work their way up the totem pole, and you know. But I played 14 years, so when I was done playing, I was 36. I was not going to start as a graduate assistant. But then again, I also had young kids at the time, and I had a girl and a boy, and I coached his, you know, t-ball teams, his basketball teams, his flag football teams. And so I just basically said, you know what? And I also was a volunteer high school coach for a while, call and play. And I coached a lot of University of Florida coaches' kids in high school. And I bet in their 3-year high school career, their dads got to see them play 3 times. They were always on the road recruiting. Yeah. And I said, you know what? My calling was coaching because of the mental portion, the X's and O's, knowing when to call plays, how to coach it up. But I'm not going to do it because I'm not going to miss my kids' lives and their dance recitals, their football games, or whatever. And so I was fortunate to coach my son through high school, and he was an all-state quarterback for 2 years at a 6A school, and loved every minute of it. But if I'd been coaching somewhere, I wouldn't have been able to be a part of it. So it sucks because that's I really believe that is the best thing that, you know, what I was made to do is coach football, call plays, but I wasn't able to do it.
It had to be exciting to be able to coach your son in that during his high school career. That's not a thing a lot of guys get to do, and that had to be a real thrill for you, I'm sure.
Oh, it was so much fun, and you know, he's a heck of a player. He was only 5'10", unfortunately, got his mom's height, but man, he was a way better player than I was.
What about you? So as you get done with that phase of your life, you move into some doing some media, and I know you did, you know, several sports talk shows in the Florida area, and you even did the post-game, pre-game and post-game shows for Florida for a while, and you might even had a little spat with Urban Meyer, if I remember right.
Well, I didn't have a spat. It's basically doing sports talk radio. You can't sit there and pick and be a homer and pick,
of course not,
your school to go 12-0 every year, because then nobody's going to listen to your damn show.
Right.
This was in 06, maybe. I think it was 06. Or maybe it was 08. I think it was in 08. The way the schedule set up, this was in August before the season started. Florida had to play Tennessee week 3, which, as I told you, back in the 90s and the early 2000s, that was the game to win the East. And it was always the 3rd week of the season. But then the following game, we were playing Ole Miss. Ole Miss was coming into the swamp. You just knew, because Ole Miss wasn't very good back in those days. It was going to be one of those noon kickoffs, which people hate playing the noon game because there's no crowd atmosphere. But they had a really talented quarterback. They had really talented receivers. And Houston Nutt, who was the head coach at the time, had always been known to take lesser talented teams into hostile environments on the road in the SEC and upset somebody. So I said, you know what? Florida will beat Tennessee, but I think they will have a letdown the following week, being a noon game with a talented Ole Miss team in here. I think Ole Miss will pull the upset. Well, he got word, he and his wife, they didn't like it, that I was talking bad about the program. I wasn't. I was just making a prediction. And I'll be damned, it happened. Ole Miss beat us and ended up winning the national title, though, believe it or not. That was the only loss of the year. But, it is what it is. I have no problems with Urban. He's one of the greatest coaches of all time. And wish him a lot of luck with the Jags.
Yeah, actually, it brings me to a good point, kind of segueing from Coach Spurrier and his NFL foray. Do you think Urban Meyer is better equipped to do better in this situation in Jacksonville than Coach Spurrier was in Washington? He's got a quarterback.
He's got a way better situation. He's got one of the like a generational type quarterback, and B, he's in charge. The owner there ain't got a damn thing to do with football, or he doesn't think he knows anything about football, so he stays out of the way. Urban's in full control. I think the Jags will win maybe 4 or 5 games this year. I don't think they're a very good team, but time will tell. I think Urban's a tremendous football coach. We'll just see. That league is just different.
Yeah, and I got to believe, yes, I think they'll struggle some this year, but I think they'll make strides pretty quickly because I don't think he's on, a 6-year plan there because Urban doesn't stay in places that long. So if they're going to win, they got to win, I think, fairly early on. And I think they will myself. I know a lot of people don't think he's going to be able to make it in the NFL, unlike yourself, but I think he's built to do this as better than a lot of college coaches have been.
Right. I'm not saying he won't be successful. I just know how hard it is to win in that league.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about all the great coaches that have coached in that league and, even Nick Saban. I mean, he didn't have much success there. Belichick didn't have much success when he was the first-time coach there in the NFL. So you never know. But they need better players. I mean, they got one of the worst defenses in the league, and they didn't really address it in free agency. So time will tell. But I think Trevor Lawrence has a chance to be a star.
It's funny that the guys you just mentioned had a lot in common with Coach Spurrier too, because the common theme was none of them had a quarterback in the NFL.
True, but
right?
Urban definitely has.
He definitely does. I meant Saban and Belichick in their first forays. They did not have any quarterbacks to speak of.
Yep.
So, what about the game today? Again, we talked about I want to talk about the Southeast Conference a little bit, and we talked about the expansion. We'll get past that. Let's look at this coming year. I know you talked a little bit about your favorites to get to the playoff, the national championship, but in the Southeast Conference, is there a team, outside of the teams we always talk about in Florida and Alabama and the LSUs, is there a team you can see coming out of relatively nowhere to have a really good year this year?
Out of the SEC West?
Yeah.
That would be A&M. I think Texas A&M is going to win the SEC West. I think Jimbo is a tremendous recruiter, tremendous play caller. They have 8 starters back from the top defense in the league. They have probably the most dynamic player in the SEC. I think he's the best player, quite honestly. His name is Ainias Smith. He plays running back. He plays receiver. Phenomenal football player. They got one of the best running backs in Isaiah Spiller. And then they got the best tight end in Weidermeyer. I know they lost Kellen Mond, but I think they're going to be better at the quarterback position with the 2 kids that they're legitimate drop back passers, which Jimbo likes to do. So I like the Aggies to win the West.
So they're going to beat Alabama.
Well, they get Alabama sometime in October in College Station.
Yeah.
And you got to remember, that's the only loss A&M had last year was at Alabama. And Alabama's got a lot of question marks. I have some close ties to some people at Tuscaloosa. They're concerned about their offensive line. They got a bunch of 5-stars, but they're young. And then who knows about their quarterback?
Yeah, other teams in that West. Do you see LSU bouncing back this year?
Well, I really like Miles Brennan, but with him being out with a broken arm, I'm not sure. They have a new defensive coordinator and a new offensive coordinator. So I think they got a lot of question marks. They are talented, but I think this is A&M's year.
One last thing on the West. What about Leach at Mississippi State? Is he going to be able to turn that program around? I mean, he got off to such a good start last year, and then the bottom fell out. And he's kind of a different kind of guy. Do you see him making it here? Yeah,
I do. I think he's great for the league. I think he and Lane Kiffin bring a lot to the teams over there in the West.
Yeah.
And you never know what they're going to talk about. But yeah, I think Leach will definitely make it.
I'm a Lane Kiffin fan, and I know there's not a ton of them around, but his teams are fun to watch play football. I mean, they'll play a lot of defense sometimes, but their offenses are just fun up and down the field.
Yeah, he's a good football coach, good offensive mind. He's got probably the best quarterback in the league, in Matt Corral.
Yeah,
so they'll score a bunch of points.
How about your Gators East? You're gonna have Georgia beating them in this division?
I think Georgia's the better football team right now. That doesn't mean they're going to win the game, though. I think Georgia was the better team last year, and Florida found a way to beat them. So time will tell. Florida's got a big matchup week 3 against Alabama in the Swamp. I don't know if we can beat them. It doesn't really – I shouldn't say it doesn't matter, but it doesn't matter because if you take care of the games you're supposed to win, it all comes down to that game against Georgia and Jacksonville. So big thing is I like Florida's chances this year. I think Emory Jones and Anthony Richardson, the two guys that are going to play quarterback, pretty much the same guy, dual threat guy. You're going to see an offense very similar to when Tim Tebow was at Florida. So, they won't be a great passing team, but they got some athletes.
I would think looking at it on paper, and maybe I'm wrong because you're closer to the situation than I am, that the East isn't as deep talent-wise on these teams than maybe the West is, and maybe a parity situation. Is that a fair comment, or do you think there's some teams that could surprise in the East?
Well, when you look at it, you got A&M, Alabama, LSU, all ranked pretty high over in the West, and then you just got Florida and Georgia.
Yeah.
The last 8-9 years, the West has been better than the East, but like I said, 15, 20 years ago, the East was better than the West. So it goes in cycles.
Who else outside the SEC do you see competing on a high level this year? And again, maybe somebody from the outside. We all know who the favorites are every year. It's the same thing. Oklahoma, Do you think, like a team like Texas, you think they're ready to make the jump?
Well, I don't know enough about their personnel. I think Steve Sarkisian's a tremendous play caller.
Yeah.
I know what he's got at quarterback. That's key. He needs to have somebody at quarterback, obviously. But yeah, I think USC can make some noise. Oklahoma, obviously, but Ohio State will be in the mix as well. It's just the way college football is now. It's going to be the same people in the mix year in and year out.
Yeah. Do you see? Well, let's jump on that for a quick second. So, with the talk of the expansion of the playoffs to 12 teams, I'd still like to see them go to 16 myself, and I think they can pull it off and still have give some of the lesser teams, because the NCAA tournament in basketball is so much fun. And I'm not saying you can go to a huge amount of teams, but I think you could play a 16-team playoff. But even going to 12, do you see that as a good thing? And do you think it could level the playing field, or will just still end up with the same teams at the end of the day anyway?
Well, I think it's going to be fun to be able to see some of the UCFs, the Cincinnati's, those guys get an opportunity. But when it's all said and done, I can probably tell you right now in the next 10 years, I can probably give you 6 to 7 schools, and one of the 6 to 7 going to win the national title in the next 10 years.
Yeah. It's funny. People talk about, who wants to watch Alabama beat Coastal Carolina by 40 in the first round? I said, well, what's the difference between that and them beating Notre Dame by 40 in the 4 game?
That's right.
team playoff. Who cares, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'd rather see Coastal Carolina and hope they can pull a tremendous upset. So
Yeah.
that'd be fun for me.
It would be fun for me as well. I like to see the smaller type schools get the opportunity, and maybe they will I guess not this year, but whenever that comes about.
Yeah, that's 5 years out too. But with all the realignment and TV contracts are going to get blown up. That's what holds everything up a lot of times. And I think we're going to see a lot of stuff shake out with the realignment and the playoff sooner than 5 years myself.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think it'll be a lot sooner. I agree.
Before we wrap things up here, Shane, tell us a little bit about Pot Up with Matthews in the morning and what you guys are doing over there, and what listeners can expect if they tune in, which I would recommend they do. It's a really, really good show. You guys cover a lot of ground over there, I'll tell you, and you have some great guests on.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically just a podcast talking sports. It's live on Facebook on Monday through Friday from 8 to 9. Of course, if you can't tune in live, you can always go back and watch it on Facebook Live, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all those digital platforms out there for podcasts. Been doing it about a year and a half. Try to get as many guests on as I can. We talk a lot of football, whether it's National Football League, college football. I get a lot of former teammates. I get Florida State people on. I get Miami Hurricanes. I get, NFL guests on. So, it's just basically shooting the breeze about their career, talking about some of the highlights and lowlights of their career and what they're doing now and what's going on in the world of sports today.
Awesome. It's a great show. And again, you don't just cover Florida, you cover everything across the country and other topics too that come up that are important in the world of sports. So I know I've heard a lot of Jacksonville talk recently on the show. So obviously there's some interest in Coach Meyer out there. So I enjoy the show. Shane, I really appreciate you coming on with me today. And I hope that we can maybe collaborate a little bit on the college show that we've started up on Wednesday nights too. And you and I can chat a little more about that when we have the opportunity.
Sounds great. I appreciate it. And go Gators.
Yes, I appreciate you coming on, and I will be rooting for Dan Mullen in the Gators myself. I like the Gators.
Good deal. Take care.
Thanks again. Bye-bye. So Shane Matthews, not Sean, Shane, Keith, dummy. Good interview. Good guy. He knows his football. He really does. And Shane probably could have been a very good, successful coach. Based on the exposure that I've had to him and the conversations I've seen him have on his show, Pot Up with Matthews in the morning. It's a really good show. Check it out. It's funny. I'll have guys on and we compete. One of the reasons we taped this interview is because Shane is on live the same time I am on Friday. But with the internet today and Facebook and YouTube, it's a virtual world. So we don't have to have everybody in live. I like to get as many people in live as I can. And so does Shane and others, but we can watch the shows anytime. So, I mean, the bulk of the views that we get on this show are after the show airs live. It's fun when we do it, get people participating. I'm glad all of you guys were in today. I want to say good morning quickly. I know I said good morning to Dave Guyette earlier. My dad is here, Bob Engel. Good morning again. Rick Sherlock was here. Good morning to you. Ronan from across the pond in rainy Ireland. Well, it's rainy here in upstate New York, I can tell you too, Ronan. Just an FYI, it feels a little like, well, it's probably warmer because it's very humid as well. But I want to get over there again. I played golf in Ireland before, and I hope to get back there one day and play again. Had a lot of fun. Different golf than we play here in the U.S., I can tell you right now. But it was a lot of fun. So again, thanks to Shane Matthews for being my guest today. We're going to talk more about college football a little bit this weekend on the Stream of Consciousness show, but obviously on Wednesday nights we've got an hour. We may stretch it to an hour and a half, depending on how much content we don't get to on a weekly basis. Right now we're just running up to the season. the games will start in a couple of weeks, and that'll change the whole tone a little bit of the show. Right now, we've been kind of doing previews of conferences and Heisman and coaches, and that'll continue for another week or two Wednesdays, I guess. Then we'll be getting into some actual football, both in the college and the pro level. I'm excited about it. I'm excited about the show. I'm excited about the season. Hopefully, COVID does not play some havoc with it. Again, some of the leagues have put decrees out there about, similar to the NFL, that if they don't have enough players to field an active roster, and I don't know what the minimum is in the NCAA, and it may be by league, that they will be forfeits. So I don't want to see that. College football played a fairly representative season last year, other than, say, the Big Ten and some other leagues. Some leagues played in the spring. Some of the smaller leagues, Albany University, for instance, their league played in the spring. But college football got through a fairly representative season last year, unlike college basketball, which was just a mess. So I hope that we can have a really good, real season this year. And there's a lot of excitement going on. Just to focus on that SEC a little bit, what we talked about with Shane. I'll tell you what, Georgia every year, I think Alabama's overrated at number one. They're rated number one because they're Alabama and Nick Saban's their coach. They did lose too many big players, especially on the offensive line, as Shane mentioned. They obviously lost their quarterback, Mac Jones, to the NFL draft and my New England Patriots. Their two best receivers, and Smith and Waddle. A lot of talent to replace in 1 year. But Alabama has, wealth of depth, so we'll see how they pan out. But I really like, to be honest with you, I like the fact that Texas A&M is, again, as Shane said, their only loss last year was to Alabama. I can see that avenging that loss this year with the game being in College Station. And I can see them winning that Western Division. And the Florida-Georgia is going to be a bulldog. That's a slip of the tongue. It's going to be a drag-out fight. And it's going to be, that game may be their head-to-head game may be the clincher there. As far as teams coming from the outside there, I mean, I can see maybe Kentucky surprising a little bit. I like Kentucky a lot. I like what they do there on defense and running the football. Tennessee with Josh Heupel, a new blood, but I don't know that Josh Heupel is actually going to be the answer there. Did a good job at Central Florida after taking over for Scott Frost. I talked about this on the college football show. But I think that I lost my train of thought reading Carlos's comment there. I'll put it up in a second, Carlos. I totally lost my train of thought. Oh, Josh Heupel. I'm not sure that, that program did regress a little bit the last bunch of years. And still a good program, Central Florida. But Josh Heupel really parlayed that into one of the best coaching jobs in the country. Carlos is talking about UT needs better recruiting and more depth. Oops, I think you're talking about Tennessee. I agree. They do need better recruiting, and they've had, again, too many down years with the recruiting classes, and it takes time to be able to come back and be really competitive. A&M could win, but would need a lot of luck as well. They got a lot of talent. Shane mentioned that they're better off it sounded like he said that they were better off at the quarterback situation without Kellen Mond. I'm a big Kellen Mond fan. Always was, and he's one of the guys, like, if the Patriots hadn't gone the way they went with a first round, which still surprised me. I thought they were going to look to go quarterback, but a real quarterback of the future project later on in the draft, and Ian Book, a Kellen Mond type player. I like Kellen Mond. I tell Rick Sherlock all the time, that who's a Minnesota Viking fan, that they may just have a potential starting quarterback for the future. He's can't play this year. He can't play right now. They don't need to, but we'll see what happens. It'll be interesting how the SEC plays out. So anyway, guys, make sure you check out Sunday's show. We will be talking again. We'll have Mark Mancini from Mancini Sports. He's all over XM Radio. He's He'll have a new show starting in Philly. He's got a bunch of shows that he produces on 4 Mancini Sports on podcast radio. I was on live with the guys and I'll probably post it later. I was on live with the guys from Take a Left at Alcatraz last night. It was a very interesting hour going back and forth with them. And I've done lots of stuff with Mark and the shows that he produces. And he brings a lot to the show on Sundays. And I enjoy that half hour. We're going to focus on football this week in that 10:30 segment. And we'll also have, by the way, at 9, right after our opening at 9:10 or so, I will have the hosts of the other no show. Last week I had on Byron Williams, who is the co-host with Jim Jeffcoat of the new show on Northeast Streaming Sports that will be starting, I think, on September 1st. Tune in for that. And this week I'll have two other guests, two doctors, Dr. Paul Semidinger and Dr. E.J. Fagan, who will be hosting Start Spreading the News, I believe on August 30th, exclusively on YouTube through Northeast Streaming Sports Network. And they're going to be talking a lot of Yankee baseball. And we'll talk to them about what to expect from their show. And we'll talk to them a little bit about the Yankees. And the Yankees are resurging. Maybe I'm wrong. I've been very hard on the Yankees all year. And I'm going to do a vlog later today, which, by the way, this will be 2 weeks in a row with a positive vlog out of Keith. So not necessarily both about the Yankees, but baseball in general. I'm down. I've been down on the Yankees all year. I've been down on Brian Cashman. I've been down on Aaron Boone. I've been down on the way this team is put together. But they're playing some great baseball right now, and I'm going to do my quick vlog today will be about that. Let's see what is. Let me see what Carlos is talking about. We got a couple minutes left here. We'll take a couple of questions. Watson's going to get a federal investigation. Texas in trouble as a team. Texas is a dumpster fire, Carlos, and so is with Deshaun Watson. You can see why he was trying to force his way out of Houston, and thank God nobody bid on that. Yeah, they're in deep doo doo, and it's a former Patriot. His name is slipping my mind right now. Is the new GM there, and he's jumped into a mess. And we'll talk a little bit about that in the coming weeks as well. We'll talk about that this week because what Mark and I are going to focus on, I think, are the quarterback situations throughout the league is my plan, and maybe some other things depending on time. Yankees do still need pitching, Carlos. I will agree with you. Well, Kluber's not back yet. I don't know if there's a timetable yet. I'll be looking into that this morning. German will be back soon. I don't know that they're enough myself. I don't know that I can count on them being there. If I could count on both of them being at top of their form through the rest of the year, I could see potentially that they do have enough pitching, but I can't count on them. Kellyan pitched great again last night until he ran out of gas a little bit in the 7th inning, I think it was. But again, he pitched really well before that. The problem is the bullpen. That's a bigger problem to me than the starters right now. Starters have pitched pretty well. Some kids have pitched pretty well. But the bullpen's a mess. Britton is just awful right now. Chapman's been awful and hurt. Really concerned about the bullpen. But we'll talk more about that on the vlog today. So thank you for your comments, Carlos. And thank you for coming in this morning, Carlos. I love Schmidt. And he's got to get healthy because he's a big part of their future going forward. We'll talk about that in later dates as well. So anyway, guys, we're going to wrap it up. I want to thank all of you for coming in live today. I want to thank Shane Matthews for being my guest and adding some great insight into both his career and Steve Spurrier's influence on Florida, the Florida program, and his jump to the NFL. Sherlock had a great question. I wish I'd asked about Tim Tebow. I hope we'll have Shane on the college football huddle at some point to get a chance to ask him that question about Tebow. Tebow did get a cut, by the way. Thank you, Carlos. Guys, you have a great Friday. I'll see you Sunday with our Stream of Consciousness, and next Wednesday with the college football huddle right here on TJ Sports Talk Network. And my screen phone. Sorry, guys. Have a great Friday.
right now, without LeBron, Lakers are struggling.
Let me tell you about a team I hate, all right? I know the Dallas Cowboy fan is here, so I had to make sure he knew how much I hate this team.
I'm ready.
I've often said that the people who run baseball, they try very hard to ruin it.
I'm from Brooklyn. I don't have a problem saying it to his face.
Oh, from Brooklyn.
Hey, you guys any